very warm welcome. You're watching Gravitas with me, Raisha Said. On the show tonight, day after Poland accused Russia of drone incursion, Russia and Belarus have now launched a major joint military exercise on NATO's doorstep, further raising alarm in Europe. Also on Gravitas, 33 hours after Charlie Kirk's death, the suspect behind the assassination is in custody and has now been named and identified as Tyler Robinson. Also, on Gravitas, we'll tell you how Nepal gets a new leader. Days after political upheaval, the country's former Chief Justice Sushila Karki has taken oath as the interim leader. All that and a lot more lined up for you on the show tonight. Let's get you started. With tanks, fighter jets and artillery, Russia and Belarus are staging a major show of force right on NATO's doorstep. The joint military drill called Zapad 2025. It comes at a time of high tension in Europe and also just 2 days after Poland claimed to have shot down Russian drones that crossed into its airspace. The exercises are being held across training grounds in both the countries, some dangerously close to the Polish border. Well, Russia's defense ministry says that the drills are also underway at sea in the Baltic and the Barents. Officially, the number of troops stand at 13,000. But Western intelligence says that the real figure may be close to around 30,000. Well, Poland is on a high alert right now. It has shut all border crossings with Belarus and deployed 40,000 troops along its eastern frontier. The Polish Interior Minister has said that the drills are nothing short of aggressive warfare scenarios, which are aimed at Poland and the European Union. Not just Poland here, Lithuania too is tightening its border security. Its leaders say that they are not taking any chances right now. Russian ally Belarus, however, insists that these joint drills, which are underway between Belarus and Russia, are being held at a safe distance from NATO states and even Ukraine. Its generals say that the war games will include drones, electronic warfare, and even AI. And all this is being done to support battlefield decision-making. Well, this is the biggest Russia-Belarus military exercise since 2021. Just months before, Russia invaded Ukraine partly from Belarusian soil. And since then, since 2021, Belarusian leader Alexander Lukashenko has stood firmly by Russian President Vladimir Putin, allowing Moscow to deploy tactical nuclear weapons and preparing to host the new Oreshnik hypersonic missile as well. And yet, Lukashenko is also trying to mend ties with Washington, D.C. because on Thursday, he freed 52 prisoners at Donald Trump's request, even declaring support for Trump's push to resolve global conflicts. According to Russia's defense ministry, the drills will play out in 2 stages. First, repelling an enemy attack on Russia and Belarus, and then restoring the so-called territorial integrity of the Union state, and further crushing the enemy with the help from friendly forces. Well, Belarus borders 3 NATO members, which are Poland, Lithuania and Latvia, plus Ukraine to the south. And that geography alone makes the current military drill, Zapad 2025, a nerve-wracking watch for Europe. Russia says that European concern is nothing more than emotional hostility. That's what Russia is claiming. And the Kremlin has refused to comment on the drone incident over Poland. It has called the allegations of provocation by Poland rubbish. Russia says its drones were striking targets in western Ukraine and not Poland. But Western leaders have called it a deliberate, a purposeful provocation by Russia. US President Donald Trump, for his part, has called the entire incident possibly a mistake on Russia's part, and that he hopes the situation will end soon. But the fallout is serious. If Europe was nervous about the possibility of a direct conflict with Russia before, it is now in an active fear zone. And so alongside Zapad, NATO has ramped its own military activity in Poland and Lithuania with allied forces on the ground. NATO members in Europe have been talking about it, with Germany already moving to permanently station a brigade in Lithuania. And talks are also growing of a NATO-led Iron Dome anti-drone shield which stretches across Eastern Europe. While all this is happening, the war in Ukraine continues to rage. Russia launched a deadly overnight drone attack on the city of Sumy on Friday, that is, and 1 person was killed and several buildings went up in flames. Russia says it also came under massive attack by Ukraine. Its defense ministry claims it shot down 221 Ukrainian drones across more than a dozen regions in just one night. Explosions were reported from Smolensk to St. Petersburg and even near Moscow. A woman was killed in Belgorod meanwhile. While the battlefield rages on between Ukraine and Russia, the question is what happens to the hopes of peace talks? The Kremlin says they are not broken off, they are just paused. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov told reporters on Friday that the channels remain open, but warned against expecting any kind of lightning-fast results. And meanwhile, on Zapad 2025 itself, Peskov says that the exercises are routine and that NATO, not Russia, has moved military infrastructure closer to Europe's borders. But with thousands of troops, tanks, warplanes and missiles in motion, Europe is watching cautiously and perhaps nervously, especially after Poland's drone incident. The stakes right now could not be bigger.
Безопасности и обороны страны. Огневого поражения радили на полигонах, отрабатывая проблематику борьбы.
Well, after a 33-hour manhunt, U.S. authorities say that they have captured the man accused of killing conservative activist and a Trump loyalist, Charlie Kirk. Law enforcement confirms the suspect is in custody, ending a high-stakes search operation. Investigators identified the suspect as a 22-year-old Tyler Robinson, that's his name, a resident of Utah. Police say Robinson made remarks to relatives suggesting that he carried out the shooting. A family member reportedly told a friend about those statements, and that friend then alerted the police. Reports suggest that Tyler Robinson confessed to his father, who served 27 years in the Washington County Sheriff's Department. Utah Governor Spencer Cox during a news conference, said that the authorities have caught the suspect, adding that investigators recovered physical evidence tying Robinson to the crime that killed Charlie Kirk.
We got him. On the evening of September 11th, a family member of Tyler Robinson reached out to a family friend who contacted the Washington County Sheriff's Office with information that Robinson had confessed to them or implied that he had committed the incident. This information was relayed to the Utah County Sheriff's Office.
According to U.S. authorities, evidence includes messages that Robinson allegedly sent on a social media platform about retrieving a rifle from a hidden location. Officials also discovered engravings on live rounds found with the suspected weapon. One bullet was allegedly inscribed with the words, and I'm quoting here, "Hey fascist, catch." Authorities say that the weapon was the same type used in the attack. U.S. President Donald Trump announced earlier that a suspect was in custody hours before the arrest became official. He told Fox News that the suspect was caught after a minister working with police contacted the man's father. Take a listen.
Well, it was a minister, and the minister went to a minister who is involved with law enforcement, by the way. And his good friend is a top U.S. Marshal. And they took it from there. And then it was a father got involved, namely his father, and said, we got to go in. And they, so I understand it. And again, subject to change. But, you know, the facts are the facts. We have the person that we think is the person we're looking for. But they drove into the police headquarters, and he's there now.
U.S. law enforcement confirmed that state and local officers made the arrest late Thursday in St. George, Utah. That's about 400 kilometers away from the location of where the incident took place. And that is southwest of the Utah Valley University campus, where Charlie Kirk was shot 2 days earlier. Investigators had circulated photos and videos from the scene. The footage showed a person sprinting across a roof after the shooting and then dropping down, what you see on the screens right now, then crossing a street and vanishing into a wooded area. FBI agents later found a bolt-action rifle in that wooded section. Officials also released surveillance stills of a man in a stairwell wearing sunglasses, a cap and a black shirt marked with an eagle and an American flag. Police say that the suspect blended in easily at the university because he looked like a typical student. They believe that he entered campus just before noon, climbed the stairwell and reached the roof to set up the attack. Now, Charlie Kirk, a prominent right-wing commentator and close ally of U.S. President Donald Trump, was shot dead while addressing students at Utah Valley University 2 days ago. The FBI had offered a $100,000 reward for information leading to the gunman. Prosecutors in Utah had already said that they would seek the death penalty once a suspect was found. Tyler Robinson now sits in custody right now, facing charges that could lead to the harshest penalty under the law. The investigation now likely shifts from manhunt to prosecution, and we will be closely tracking it. In other news, after days of violence and political upheaval, Nepal is turning the page. The country's former Chief Justice, Sushila Karki, who is also the first female to serve on the position, is now all set to take oath as the country's interim Prime Minister. After several rounds of negotiations between the army chief, a delegation of young demonstrators and the president, 73-year-old Sushila Karki has been chosen to lead the country. She will be taking oath any time from now. Sushila Karki is a top jurist who is known for her anti-corruption stance. She studied law from Belarus Hindu University in India. She was appointed as the permanent judge to Nepal's Supreme Court in 2006. And after 10 years in the top court, she became Nepal's first Chief Justice. In 2017, she also faced impeachment but later retired from the post. Now, at 73, Nepal's Gen Z is banking on her to deliver change in Nepal. More than 50 people died in demonstrations that engulfed the Himalayan nation. Over 2 days of demonstrations, rejection of the existing political elite was extremely evident. Several government buildings, including Parliament, were set on fire. Leaders from all the political parties faced widespread public anger as well. Now, Nepal's Parliament is said to be dissolved under the current constitution. The president is bound to call for fresh elections within a span of 6 months. All right, the United Nations General Assembly has voted in favor of a peaceful settlement of the Palestine issue and also the implementation of a two-state solution. The resolution, called the New York Declaration, was approved by a majority of 142 countries in favor, 10 against and 12 abstaining. The resolution supports a future Palestinian state but without Hamas. It also demands that Hamas should release all hostages, and the UN General Assembly condemns the October 7, 2023 attacks. The declaration urges immediate international cooperation to stop the fighting in Gaza and also establish a just and lasting settlement between Israelis and Palestinians with a functioning two-state outcome at its core. Backed earlier this year by the Arab League and signed by 17 countries in July, the resolution not only criticizes Hamas but also seeks to remove the group entirely from governing Gaza. Not just that, it also calls on Hamas to rather relinquish weapons, end its control of Gaza and hand over authority to the Palestinian Authority, albeit with outside support to make that transition possible. Now, the vote comes just days before a major UN summit scheduled in New York on September 22nd, co-hosted by France and Saudi Arabia. French President Emmanuel Macron said earlier this year that he will officially recognize a Palestinian state at this gathering following Macron's announcement. Well, Britain, Canada, Australia and Belgium also declared that they will extend recognition. 147 of the UN's 193 member nations already acknowledge Palestinian statehood. From within Europe, Spain, Ireland and Norway joined that list only last year. These moves are widely interpreted as a part of a strategy to increase diplomatic and political pressure on Israel to stop the war in Gaza. Well, the New York Declaration also envisions a UN Security Council-approved international stabilization mission in Gaza, with the goal is to provide security, help civilians, and help the Palestinian Authority to assume control of governance and other duties in the territory. Further, the recognition of Palestinian statehood is not new. About 3/4 of UN member states have done so since the Palestinian leadership declared independence in exile back in 1988. Yet, after nearly 2 years of devastating conflict in Gaza, which is combined with expanded Israeli settlements in the West Bank and talk from Israeli officials about annexing territory, many observers and leaders warn that the dream of a sovereign Palestinian state may soon disappear entirely, and Israel's leadership is perhaps leaving extremely no room for doubt.
We said there would not be a Palestinian state, and we say again there won't be a Palestinian state. This place is ours. We will take care of our country and our security and our heritage.
While the United Nations General Assembly vote is historic, all attention continues to remain on the future of the war in Gaza, where the death toll nears 65,000 and counting. That's the number. And the fighting on ground continues. All right, on to the United States now. After days of speculation of will he, won't he, US President Donald Trump might have finally made up his mind with regards to his visit to India for the Quad Summit later this year. Sergio Gore, Trump's nominee for ambassador to India, told the Senate Foreign Relations Committee that the US President is fully committed towards meeting with the Quad, thus dropping hints that Trump might actually visit India for the summit. At a hearing, he, along with fellow Republicans, indicated warm bilateral ties between New Delhi and Washington, D.C., and all this despite the recent tensions, and said that both the nations are not that far apart when it comes to tariffs. Also, talking about India and BRICS, Gore remarked on Trump's position on India buying Russian oil.
President Trump has been crystal clear on this. They must stop buying Russian oil. The Indians have been on our side on various issues within BRICS, including several individuals in BRICS, Brazil, China, have pushed for years to move away from the US dollar. India has been the stopgap for that.
And not just Gore, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio too said, and I quote, India is one of the top relationships that the United States has in the world today. And that's in terms of the future of what the world's going to look like, unquote. That's what Rubio has stated. The Quad Leaders Summit is set to be hosted by India later this year. Back in February, during his visit to the U.S., Prime Minister Narendra Modi had invited Trump to attend the meeting. However, Trump's tariff curveball is believed to have somewhat set India-U.S. ties off balance right now. The U.S. has traditionally counted on India as a potential counterweight to China. However, Trump's blow-hot and cold approach and mixed signaling have rather put the ties heavily under test in recent days. On one hand, Trump wants to court India and wants it as a top strategic partner. But on the other, he had reportedly asked the European Union to impose 100% tariffs on India and China as a punishment for doing trade with Russia. India-US bilateral trade there is worth more than $190 billion each year. India is also the world's fifth largest economy, also poised to become the third largest with a predicted GDP of $7.3 trillion by 2030. Geopolitically too, India is placed well and has emerged as a key voice in the global south in recent times. Just last week, Prime Minister Modi's meeting with the Russian President Vladimir Putin and the Chinese President Xi Jinping at the SCO summit confirmed one thing, that India is fast gaining ground in the global diplomacy stage and would not be intimidated easily. Washington seems to be picking on that hint easily to bring ties back on track. Well, in a major breakthrough on the India-US trade front, a US trade team is set to visit India on the coming Wednesday. This will be the first visit by an American trade delegation to New Delhi. Well, since Washington slapped a 50% tariff on India back in August, that's under US President Donald Trump's pressure campaign. Despite the tariffs, ties now seem to be back on a reconciliatory track. Recent remarks from both the US President Donald Trump and India's Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal hint that a possible trade deal could be sealed as early as November this year. Just days ago, Trump publicly spoke of his deep friendship with Prime Minister Modi, a sentiment that Prime Minister Modi quickly reciprocated on X, saying, and I quote here, deeply appreciates and fully reciprocates the US president's words. On September 9th, Trump confirmed that trade talks were underway, which are aimed at resolving differences and unlocking what he called the limitless potential of the partnership. Remember, back in February, the Modi-Trump summit unveiled the US-India Compact, a roadmap to strengthen trade to $500 billion by 2030, with focus areas like semiconductors, electric vehicles, and also renewable energy. American exports in aircraft and machinery are expected to balance well at this point of time, with India's strengths in pharma and IT. From tariff tensions to talk of a trade deal, Washington and New Delhi now seem closer than ever to turning promises into reality. And right now, all eyes will be on the US trade team visit to see if it marks the first step towards a strong partnership. Let's tell you what else lined up for you on the show tonight. We'll tell you about US President Donald Trump's Nobel Peace Prize push, which Trump has been adamant on, but now it seems that the committee has snubbed Trump's wish. Also on the show, former Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro has been sentenced to 27 years in prison for a coup plot. All right, US President Donald Trump wants the Nobel Peace Prize badly, and he has made no secret of it since returning to the White House in January. But there's a problem. The Norwegian Nobel Committee is not listening. In fact, they are saying it loud and clear, they cannot and will not be swayed. Now, why is Trump so fixated on getting the Nobel Peace Prize? What's his reason? Well, it's because of former US President Barack Obama. Remember, in 2009, Barack Obama won the prize just months into his tenure. Critics called it premature, and Trump clearly has not forgotten. He wants that same recognition, and he is convinced that it is his turn now. He even claims that he has ended 6 wars. He has been saying it time and again, 6, that's the word that Trump has used. We wonder how he got that number, because Gaza is still burning, Ukraine is still bleeding. He has said he will resolve them. That was his election promise. But these are some of the bloodiest conflicts today, and they are still raging. So despite his promises of ending them and his statements about ending 6 wars, the Nobel Committee is unmoved. Its secretary, Christian Berg Harpweken, has told news agency AFP in Oslo that, yes, the Nobel Committee has noticed the media hype around some contestants, but no, it does not influence their closed-door discussions. Now, each nominee, he insists, is judged only on merit. So when will the big announcement be made? The date is October 10th. That's when the world will know who this year's Nobel laureate is. But Trump is wasting no time building his case. He has been quick to point out how world leaders like Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, or for that matter, Azerbaijan's Ilham Aliyev, have backed his nomination. Now, that support sounds powerful, right? You might be wondering that, except that it is not. Because nominations closed on January 31st. That is just 11 days after Trump took office. Unless his friends had a time machine, the endorsements did not count this year. And let's also be honest at this point of time, getting nominated is not the price. Anyone from lawmakers to university professors can throw in a name, and thousands do it every year. The real achievement is making it from a 338 strong long list onto that secret shortlist and then actually winning. This year, there are reportedly 338 individuals and organizations under consideration for that prestigious title. The committee deliberates and makes its decision based on research and not media spin, not even campaigns. Trump is said to have even brought it up during a phone call with Norway's finance minister Jens Stoltenberg back in July. It happened during a conversation about tariffs. The ministry confirmed the call, but not the Nobel talk. And if by all these layers of filtering, he does make it to the short list, there are other criteria. Like, is he really likely to get a Nobel laureate there? Now, history suggests otherwise. The committee has repeatedly shown its independence, even ignoring its own government. In 2010, it awarded the prize to Chinese dissident Liu Xiaobo. This decision had angered China and plunged ties with China into a deep freeze that lasted years. Experts say Trump's heavy-handed push is only going to backfire. Norway, after all, champions multilateralism, the very principle Alfred Nobel himself stood for. And that multilateralism is what Trump has challenged with his policy decisions. And that is with his America First playbook. If that wasn't enough, in August, 3 Nobel historians went public listing as to why Trump does not deserve the prize. Among their reasons, number one, his open admiration for the Russian President Vladimir Putin, who has been waging on Ukraine for 3 years now. So, October 10th, Trump wants it, but will he get it? If history, independence, and expert opinion are anything to go by, the odds are not in the US president's favor.
I knew him as president of Brazil. He was a good man.
Well, shifting focus to Brazil, former Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro has been convicted with the ruling sharply dividing Brazilians right now. Bolsonaro has been sentenced to over 27 years in prison after being convicted of plotting a coup to remain in power after losing the election in 2022. This dealt a strong blow to one of the world's prominent far-right populist leaders, making him the first former president in the country's history to be convicted for attempting a coup. Bolsonaro's supporters had hoped for America's help in overturning the ruling. On the other side, his opponents took to streets and captured bars in the capital, singing, dancing, and lighting fireworks.
Traga a sua, vos gloriareis. A consolar. É minha amiga.
Demonstrators also celebrated Bolsonaro's conviction, calling it justice.
On behalf of the 700,000 people who died during COVID, today they rest in peace. Justice has been served.
What we expect from the U.S. is help. We are asking for help from the U.S., a country that has a history of fighting communism and has seen that the injustice here is clear and has already crossed the borders of Brazil.
U.S. President Donald Trump expressed his surprise at Bolsonaro's conviction and called the verdict a terrible thing.
In Brazil, Bolsonaro was just found guilty by the Supreme Court. You've been very clear that you would apply sanctions. Are you thinking further sanctions to Brazil because of this Bolsonaro?
Well, I watched that trial. I know him pretty well. Foreign leader. I thought he was a good president of Brazil. And it's very surprising that could happen. That's very much like they tried to do with me, but they didn't get away with it at all. But I can only say this. I knew him as president of Brazil. He was a good man. And I don't see that happening.
Trump had earlier called the case against Bolsonaro a witch hunt and slammed Brazil with tariff hikes, sanctions against the presiding judge, and the revocation of visas for most members of Brazil's High Court. Amid the trial, Brazil's President Lula da Silva said that Brazil teaches others how to practice democracy. Lula also briefly commented on Trump's tariffs imposed on Brazil and the implications that they could have in the coming days.
There is no provocation. Anything we do from now on is a response to the provocation made against Brazil. How do you think the President of the Republic of Brazil feels when the President of another country imposes a 50% tariff on his products, claiming that he has a trade deficit, when in fact he has had a surplus of used $410 billion for 15 years?
Besides attempts to engineer a coup, Bolsonaro has also been found guilty of leading an armed criminal organization, of attacking democracy and causing damage to federal property and protected cultural assets in Brazil. All right, South Sudan is once again facing a political crisis that could threaten its fragile peace. The nation's vice president, Riek Machar, has been formally charged with murder, treason, and crimes against humanity. The charges are in connection with deadly attacks earlier this year. Machar is accused of directing violence in the northeastern town of Nasir. These attacks were carried out by the White Army, which is an ethnic militia group allegedly aligned with Machar's faction.
Evidence further suggests, actually reveals, that the White Army operated under the command and influence of certain leaders of the Sudan's People Liberation Movement Army in Opposition, SPLM-AIO, including Dr. Riek Machar through a coordinated military and political structures. So based on evidence, the following charges were prepared under South Sudan laws and applicable international laws. 1, murder. This is in accordance with Section 206, Penal Code Act 2008, in particular the killing of Major General David Major, 250 SSPDF soldiers and UN personnel.
Machar has been under house arrest since March. 20 others have also been indicted, including the country's former petroleum minister. But global powers are voicing alarm. They say detaining Machar threatens the 2018 peace deal that ended a brutal civil war which claimed 400,000 lives. Civil society leaders in South Sudan are calling for a fair trial and not a political show trial. They warn that how this case is handled could actually assess whether the nation steps towards justice or slides back into war. Now, South Sudan continues to suffer from internal political rivalries, conflict, displacement, and under-provision of essential services. In 2019, actor George Clooney called for action against multinationals, Western tycoons and brokers who profited from South Sudan's instability. Back then, that's in 2019 we're talking about, the actor warned the policymakers that if you don't care what happens in South Sudan and its problems, then it will end on your doorsteps. That was the warning made by Clooney. And tonight, when the people of Sudan are rising up, the Western stars and the human rights industry that fought for this are absent. They're nowhere to be seen, and we ask, where are George Clooney and the company when Sudan needs them the most? And shifting our focus to India now, the country's leader of opposition, Rahul Gandhi, is under fire for his security protocol breaches. The BJP has now issued a strong message to the Congress after the CRPF warned that Rahul Gandhi was violating security protocols, and that is during his foreign travels. Senior BJP leader Anurag Thakur said that the issue must be taken very seriously by Congress President Mallikarjun Kharge. He warned that security lapses involving the former Congress President Rahul Gandhi could have dire consequences. The remarks came a day after the CRPF's VVIP security chief wrote to Gandhi and copied the letter to Kharge as well, accusing Rahul Gandhi of not taking his Z-plus security cover seriously. The letter highlighted multiple foreign trips made without prior intimation, including visits to Italy, Vietnam, Dubai, Qatar, London, and even Malaysia. The CRPF said that this violates the Yellow Book guidelines that govern advanced security liaison procedures under Z-plus security. That is, a VIP's destination is supposed to be secured in advance with reconnaissance teams deployed to ensure that there are no gaps. So this is not the first time that security forces have flagged concerns. In 2022, the CRPF reported that Rahul Gandhi had violated protocols more than 100 times since 2020. That's also including the Delhi leg of his Bharat Jodo Yatra. Just last month in Bihar, a security scare erupted when a man suddenly hugged and kissed Gandhi during a motorbike rally, forcing security personnel to intervene. Anurag Thakur said that the Congress president should now direct his leader to avoid breaches and ensure that the CRPF is not forced to issue more warnings. All right, Albania names the world's first ever AI-powered minister, and she's been tasked with the one job where corruption thrives: government procurement. Meet Diela, not a career lawmaker, not a party loyalist, not even a human. She is an artificial intelligence system, an AI robot. Unveiled by Prime Minister Edi Rama as Albania's new Minister for Public Procurement. Diela, which means sun in Albanian, will manage and award all public tenders in which the government contracts private companies for various projects. Diela promises transparency, every contract fed into a system, and every bid weighed on data, not backroom deals. Every winner published instantly online. It's meant to slash corruption at the source. But will it work? Critics warn that the system itself will be controlled by humans, civil servants, IT engineers, and political lawmakers. If the code can be tweaked, the door to manipulation remains open. And can Diela, the AI system, handle lobbying, pressure, and even the subtle games that define Balkan politics? For now, Albania has made history. The first country to hand a ministerial job to AI, to artificial intelligence. The promise: clean governance, the risk. Another tool in the hand of those already pulling the strings. The world is watching. Will Diela become a weapon against corruption or just another face of it? Well, in other news, a UK-based data watchdog is sounding the alarm. Teenagers are hacking into their own schools' computer systems. Between January 2022 and August 2024, at least 215 data breaches in UK schools were linked to insider cyber attacks, and more than half were carried out by students themselves. A close look at those 215 breaches showed nearly a quarter of them were caused by poor data security, like staff leaving devices unlocked, students using teachers' computers, or data being sent to personal devices. The UK's Information Commissioner's Office is now urging schools to update their data protection regulation, training tighten password policies, and also limit student access. The watchdog warns that insider attacks can have serious consequences. It is calling on parents to talk openly to children about their online behavior. The agency has said that cybersecurity, stronger data protection and clearer online guidance could perhaps help divert young people from entering the cybercrime industry. The watchdog's report comes just days after a separate finding from the UK's National Crime Agency. The agency says that 1 in 5 children aged under 10 or between 10 to 16 have engaged in illegal online activity. Most are English-speaking boys and about 5% of 14-year-olds. Both boys and girls admit to hacking as well. Their motives range from dares and revenge to financial gain and bragging rights. Two black holes crash into each other 4 billion light years away, creating ripples that prove that Einstein and Hawking were absolutely correct all along. The $1.1 billion LIGO detector captured the cosmic collision in an unprecedented detail, validating theories that seemed impossible when first proposed. Now, we witness the moment science fiction becomes science fact. Take a look.
Two invisible monsters, each 32 times heavier than our sun, spinning around each other at unimaginable speeds before smashing together in the ultimate cosmic car crash. The collision happened 4 billion years ago, but the shockwaves only just reached Earth. And they've proven two of history's greatest minds were spot on. Albert Einstein predicted these ripples in space-time over a century ago. Hawking said black hole surfaces can never shrink, only grow. Both seemed like wild theories back then. Today, we have proof.
My name is Chad Hanna, and I am a professor of physics at Penn State. Einstein predicted that gravity was actually the consequence of massive objects bending space and time. When he first calculated this prediction, he realized that this effect was going to be extremely small and almost impossible to measure. And it took scientists literally 100 years between Einstein's first prediction and the LIGO discovery to pull together the technology, the theory, the methods to be able to prove his prediction correct.
The $1.1 billion LIGO detector, a pair of L-shaped tunnels stretching 4 kilometers each, felt the universe literally stretch and squeeze by less than 1/10,000th the width of a single proton. That's like measuring the distance from Earth to the nearest star to within the thickness of human hair. When those two black holes merged, they created something spectacular. A monster black hole with the mass of 63 suns spinning at 100 revolutions per second. Its event horizon, the point of no return, covers 400,000 square kilometers, roughly the size of Japan. LIGO, with its ultra-fine lasers and kilometers-long arms, did the heavy lifting. It caught the signal more clearly than ever. It measured the faint ring down, the final shakeout as the new black hole settled, and saw that the laws laid out decades ago apply. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Japanese women are taking their place in sumo's global arena, training hard and ready to compete. They are preparing for the World Championships in Bangkok. It's a step forward for a male-dominated sport steeped in tradition there. Sumo remains close to women in Japan. More than 600 women train and compete at an amateur level, embracing the sport's challenges and also discipline.
将来的にはやっぱりオリンピックに In the future, I want to see sumo become an Olympic sport. And I hope for a world where there's no distinction between men and women in sumo, where girls can train freely and continue into adulthood. It's okay for girls to be strong and play sumo. I want them to grow strong, regardless of gender.
Well, the women wrestle in modified attire, including spandex under their belts, as tradition restricts professional female competition but not amateur events. The training involves building strength, perfecting techniques to push or throw opponents out of the ring, and also forming strategies to face physically larger competitors.
Women's sumo is so powerful, it could easily match the intensity of professional sumo. Many of the wrestlers are lightweight, but they're very agile. When I saw them throwing each other and falling face first without using their hands to break the fall, I was deeply impressed. That moment made me want to take on this job, and that's how I became head coach.
Women, however, remain barred from the traditional sumo ring in professional sumo, despite the sport's 1,500-year history in Japan. Also, an historic and groundbreaking ruling, South Africa's Constitutional Court has declared that men have the legal right to take their surnames of their wives or to hyphenate their own surnames with their wives' names. This judgment overturns a long-standing law that effectively barred husbands from doing so. It has also recognized the previous law as discriminatory and unconstitutional. Until now, South African law, specifically the Births and Deaths Registered Act, only allowed women to change their surnames upon marriage. Men, on the other hand, were prohibited from adopting their wives' surnames or combining their surnames with their wives' names. The case was brought to court by two couples, one of which wanted to honor the woman's parents who died when she was young. In the other case, the woman wanted to keep her ties to her family surname as she was an only child. Previously, men would have to apply to the Home Affairs Department to change their surname, a request that was not automatically granted. Provisions allowing men to assume their wife's surname on marriage are already in place in yet other countries, mainly in Europe and in certain US states as well. Fashion icon Ralph Lauren kicked off New York Fashion Week with the debut of his Spring 2026 collection, which he says appeals to his customers' strength and sensuality. This intimate show, held at the designer's Madison Avenue headquarters, featured a collection dominated by black and white looks with pops of red. Find out more about his latest collection in our next report. And with that, we slip into a very short break, but we're leaving you with Gravitas World View. Thanks very much for staying with us. Keep watching WION World Respond.
India's Global Voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION. World is one.
On Inside South Asia this week, Nepal stares at massive political uncertainty. KP Oli quits as Prime Minister amid the most volatile public protest in the country's history. 2 weeks after an earthquake that killed over 2,200 people, no end to Afghanistan's plight. Continuing aftershocks and medieval Taliban-style diktats against helping women stifle recovery hopes. And in Pujo season, India-Bangladesh Hilsa diplomacy alive and kicking. Dhaka to export big consignments ahead of festival season. All this and much more on Inside South Asia.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening. As we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more